Most AI projects that I see, they don't fail because of the model. They fail because nobody clearly defined what success looks like, and nobody built the measurement discipline to support it.
The biggest misconception people have about evaluation is that it's as easy as going to a vendor that will give you off-the-shelf metrics in a dashboard, and you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is plug it in to your AI application, and poof, you have evals. You have done evals, you have checked the box. Now, most people who take that approach, they fail spectacularly.
Why isn't the QA and test team that are existing in enterprises just enough for LLM and agentic systems? Who in the enterprise do you think should kind of actually own evaluation? Can't we just automate? Can't we use LLM as judges? What are the right metrics? How do you connect them to the business outcomes?
Sounds like the wrong approach, but that is the right approach when you're starting out. Essentially, data science for AI.
If you are building AI systems inside an enterprise right now, this episode might be one of the most important ones you will listen this year. Hi everyone, welcome to the podcast. If you are building AI systems inside an enterprise right now, this episode might be one of the most important ones you will listen this year. Most AI projects that I see, they don't fail because of the model. They fail because nobody clearly defined what success looks like, and nobody built the measurement discipline to support it. We are in a phase where enterprises are rapidly building LLM applications and agentic systems. But while everyone is talking about prompts, models, and tools, far fewer teams are talking about evaluation as a first-class capability. Today's conversation is about changing that mindset. Today, I'm joined by Hamel Husain, someone who has been deeply influential in shaping how practitioners think about evaluation in modern AI systems. Hamel has worked at the intersection of machine learning, product, and real-world deployment for years. He's known for translating complex machine learning ideas into practical systems that actually work in production. Most recently, he has been a strong voice in advancing evaluation practices for LLMs and generative AI products, helping teams move from intuition-based building to measurement-driven iteration. What I appreciate about Hamel's perspective is that it's grounded in reality, how systems behave in production, how teams collaborate, and how organizations make decisions. And that's exactly what we are going to unpack today. If you're a data engineer, AI architect, product leader, or someone responsible for taking AI into production, this episode is for you. Let's get into it. Hi, Hamel. Thank you for joining the Agent Build podcast. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm doing great. Really happy to be here.
Thanks. So, Hamel, just to set the context, right? My audience are primarily data and AI engineers, architects, and leaders, technical leaders in this space who are building systems inside enterprises. Now, they listen to this podcast to get practical insights, things that are happening on the ground, things that are actually working and not working with AI in production. And with you, I want to explore how evaluation becomes a critical component when we talk about AI in production systems, right? And especially when organizations are thinking about scaling with AI applications or even agentic systems. So the goal today is to unlock how large enterprises can adopt evaluation as a practice.
Absolutely. Happy to talk about that.
Great stuff. So when you look at enterprise AI adoption today, what is the biggest misconception that you find in organizations that you work with about evaluation?
Yeah, the biggest misconception people have about evaluation is that it's as easy as going to a vendor that will give you off-the-shelf metrics in a dashboard, and you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is plug it in to your AI application, and poof, you have evals. You have done evals. You have checked the box. Now, most people who take that approach, they fail spectacularly. And it's because what they do is they wire up an eval vendor to their product and they get a dashboard. And maybe they're happy for the first week or so because they feel like they're making some kind of progress. But pretty soon people start to understand that the metrics, these generic metrics on a dashboard, don't mean anything, and no one really understands what those are. So for example, if you're looking at a typical sort of plug and play eval dashboard, you'll get a whole slew of metrics: coherence score, faithfulness score, toxicity score, whatever, you name it. And those are generic and they don't really tend to correlate with things that matter for your application. And so that's the number one thing that people get wrong when we're talking about debugging, testing, and doing evals for AI apps. So that's the thing that you want to avoid.
Makes sense. And I think one of the other misconceptions that I see is around the definition of evals self, right? So like there are the large language model evals and benchmarks that come out, and then there's this products side of evals. Can you like put that simply for our audience so that they can differentiate between the different kinds of evals?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So the question is, what is the difference between foundation model evals and product specific evals? And so when you hear the word evals, it's important to differentiate which one we're talking about. And so for foundation model evals, you may have seen benchmarks reported by OpenAI, Anthropic, things like that, things like SweBench or MMLU or Human Eval. And these are different benchmarks that sort of give you a sense of the general capability of a model at large. Now, these benchmarks don't tend to correlate to your product specific performance. So you don't want to necessarily use those benchmarks for your product. It doesn't make any sense. You need to have metrics specific to your product. So you can think of it as these foundation model evals are more like a standardized test, whereas product specific evals are like, what is your job performance? So there can be a very big drift between how you scored on the SAT and how good of a engineer or product manager you are. Completely different situation. And so when we're talking about today, when we're talking about evals, what we're talking about is how do you measure if your AI product is good for its specific purpose that you are building, not in a very general sense.
Makes sense. I think when I work with customers, right? I think I spend initially spend a lot of my time in explaining why generative AI systems need like fundamentally different evaluation, mechanism or straight strategy, right? So because my customers, they would say that, oh, we already have a QA team or a test team. Why do we need another team that will just test generative AI systems? Why isn't the QA and test team that are existing in enterprises just enough for LLM and agentic systems?
Yeah. Okay. So why isn't AI evals just like software testing? And treating your AI evals or AI product like traditional software is a huge mistake. And the number one reason is with software, your output is largely deterministic. You can write unit tests. You can test against, what the known set of behaviors is that you want to occur. With AI, your output is stochastic, and it can be chat output. It can be other kinds of output that is fundamentally designed explicitly to be stochastic. And so how do you measure stochastic outputs? That's a very different regime than, traditional software testing. Now, we don't have to invent anything new. What we can do is we can borrow data science and machine learning fundamentals, which is a discipline that has long had to deal with measuring stochastic systems and debugging them and figuring out how to increase their quality over time. And we can use those same techniques for AI product. We have to tweak them a little bit for LLMs, but largely they stay the same. And so what that means is you want to have some data literacy. You want to learn some skills of how do you look at, sample, and analyze data. And then also when you do analyze the data, how do you design experiments and tests that can account for the stochastic nature of things? And so fundamentally, that's what evals is. It's essentially data science for AI.
Makes sense. I think, you have partly answered one of the follow-up questions I would have asked is if there are established test QA teams within enterprises, what is needed for them to then adopt this new mindset? Like what kind of skills would they need if enterprises had to upskill them? And do you think that is enough, or there are other personas in the organization that should get involved in the evaluation phase?
Okay, so it's not enough just to upskill your QA team because it's fundamentally a different exercise completely. And the one thing you don't want to do is outsource evals to another team, especially to a development team or a QA team. Fundamentally, evals need to sit with the domain expert. And what do I mean by domain expert? Domain expert is, okay, if you have a legal assistant, it needs to be a lawyer. If it's a mental health chatbot, it needs to be some kind of psychiatrist or psychologist or someone qualified to know whether or not the output is good and has the taste and the judgment that is aligned with your product and has the domain expertise. Because that is the person that is going to be doing a lot of the core activities involved with evals, which is looking at the data. Now, you might be wondering, how is this domain expert going to do evals? These domain experts are not technical. And that's where you have to reorganize things a little bit. So you can expose tools to your domain experts, especially very easily nowadays, especially with coding agents like Claude, Cursor, or whatnot. And you can expose interfaces and tools that allow those domain experts to do their job, to annotate data where they need to write prompts where they need to, so on and so forth. You don't want to separate the domain expert from the prompts. The whole purpose of LLM fundamentally is to remove the barrier between domain experts and what they want to build. And that's why you can
Mhm.
chat with them in English. So it would be very, very counterproductive if you did that in your organization. You want to keep the domain expert in the middle. And so fundamentally what it requires you to do is like think a lot differently about testing
Mhm.
and about building a product. And it's not just, hey, this technical team is going to do it and ensure that it's good. No, that's not going to work. You have to think it requires a little bit of rewiring in terms of product thinking and
Mhm.
data thinking to sort of drive an AI product forward in this way.
That makes sense. So I think when a company or business like embarks on this journey of, okay, we have to like now think about the evaluation strategy for AI systems. Who in the enterprise do you think should kind of actually own evaluation to kind of build the teams, bring the right people together? Is there a particular role that you see, like one person who should basically own this?
Yeah, ultimately, it's the product owner who owns that specific feature or product that you're trying to build. Sometimes it's a product manager, sometimes it's an engineering leader. It really depends who that is. And it really is whoever the organization trusts in terms of their product taste. So, one of the things we talk about a lot when we're teaching evals is the concept of benevolent dictator, which is just a
Mhm.
funny way of saying just remove barriers to doing evals and don't try to judge everything by committee because this is where evals can get stuck. What you want to do is when
Mhm.
you're first starting out in building your product, you want to have anoint someone that you trust that has really good product taste, that is aligned with your product vision and has all that context drive that process. And fundamentally, evals is not a separate, should not be thought of a separate thing at all from the engineering of your product. It
Mhm.
fundamentally is just, it's very much part of building your AI product. It's not really a separate thing. Right now, we're teaching it as a separate thing because this is a very nascent area and we're trying to upskill people. But it really isn't a separate discipline, let's say, or a separate job title or anything like that. Just like how testing is not a separate thing you do in software engineering, it should be part of your development loop. Um, and so really, I mean, it's this is really the only sustainable way to build an AI product.
Mhm. You run your course for AI engineers and product managers. Um, do you think these are just the roles that should participate in this journey? Because I know when you were talking about eval strategy, you mentioned some of the other personas, like the domain expert could n- could well not be an AI engineer or a product manager. Um, what are the roles that you think usually participate in this whole evaluation mechanism?
Yeah. So I always get asked, what are the roles that should be responsible for evals? Is it a product manager? Is it an engineer? Is it a director? Is it an engineering leader? What is it and who is it? And ultimately, I think roles are changing given
Hmm.
AI. So you might have these different roles. So it's important to separate the person from the role. I think that people going forward are going to have multiple roles. The roles are going to collapse into one
Hmm.
person. So like, you might be doing some product work, some engineering, some engineering work. Um, and ultimately that you already see this happening. You see product managers building applications and doing engineering. You see engineers doing design. You see design people doing engineering. Because of AI coding tools and the way it's accelerating everything, I think this is going to be the expectation going forward is that
Hmm.
people are going to be doing multiple roles. In fact, collapsing those roles into a single person is part of the productivity gain of AI. You have less overhead, you can move faster, so on and so forth. And so it would be kind of a mistake to try to name a role per se, like, hey, it's always the product manager, it's always the engineer. And that's why I'm explaining it as, hey, it is whoever has the most aligned taste and context of what the product should be. And so in today's world, a lot of times that can be a sort of product manager. However, in many organizations, that's an engineer. There's like a really good engineer, has a good taste and good product sense, and a lot of, has a good sense of what should be in the product. You'll find engineers like that. You'll find founders like
Yeah.
that can skew more towards product or more towards engineering. Really, what it comes down to is, um, you know, teaching everybody a little bit of that skill because it's fundamental. It's a fundamental skill, just like using AI or anything like that. It's really helpful for people to understand, oh, how do we look at data? How do we debug things? What questions should we ask? How do we know if we're going down the wrong path? And so on and so forth. And so I definitely think you can kind of have like an expertise in this kind of skill, but I think today's roles are too much in flux to be able to tell you, okay, like, is this one? I think that would just cause confusion, to be honest.
True, true. I see that as well. Um, if so, let's think of a large enterprise. Like let's think of a large bank, right? And let's say this bank has got, I don't know, 50 odd AI use cases in the pipeline that they want to build, um, and they want to build this evaluation practice. In your view, is that even viable to think about evaluation practice from top down, or should it be bottom up, like a team building one of the use cases can adopt an eval strategy? Is in large enterprises, do you think there is like a central practice kind of thing for evaluation?
I'm a big fan of the bottoms up. And the reason is top down is kind of shoving this idea down people's throats like, hey, we want to be good at evals. And then the question immediately is, what is evals? Why do I need
Mm,
evals? And, you know, convince me that I need evals. Like, I'm trying to build something over here. Why are you telling me I need to do evals? Why does everyone have to do evals? And you want to have a central authority that's going to tell me I need to do evals? And then that central authority is going to give you some tools and some whatever and some infrastructure. Be like, do evals this way, and you're going to be forced to check this box, begrudgingly check the box
mm,
that you are doing evals, and everyone is going to do a dance and say, oh yeah, like we're doing evals and we are complying with the evals, but then no one really cares and no one really wants to do that. So like, I would suggest don't do that. Maybe if you're mature and if you're doing evals for a long time and everyone is convinced that you need evals, then it may be time you can have like maybe more centralized effort. But from the beginning, it needs to be very needs based. It's not that you
mm,
need evals, it's that you need to test and debug and improve your system. So you need
yeah.
some way to do that. It can be evals, it can be magic fairy dust, whatever way that you have to improve your AI system. Now, um, I can, you can bet that every team building an AI product wants that. They want some way to debug their product, to know whether it's working, to make it better. And they want a way to do that that saves them time and that gives them confidence in what they're doing. So you don't even have to call it evals. It's just like, hey, how do we build AI products in a way, in an effective way? In a way that we are confident that is working and that reduces risk and allows us to move faster. Like, how do we do that? In the beginning, you don't need evals. You don't need anything. You could just start building, right? And you can sort of spot check things and you can see, okay, is it doing something sensible for like some known use cases that I have? And you can use the product yourself. Like if you're working in the bank and you have a help assistant, yeah, you can get started there. It's just that when you get past that point and you're now tasked with maintaining, improving the system, Like, how do you do that? Sure, you can have software tests, but then, like, how do you actually make it align to the business? How do you make it really good? And how do you move that product beyond, oh, like we have an AI product, like check the box, we're
Mm,
using AI, let's feel good, to, oh, we actually have a product that is making a difference for the customer and is really good and brings them lots of delight, and how do we make a product that's better than our competitors? That's when it gets into the game of it needs to be really good. And the only way to make something really good is this sort of discipline, measurement, debugging, testing that is more systematic. Otherwise, it's impossible.
makes sense. When you work with your customers, what are the biggest cultural or mindset related issues that you see that block them or prevent them from taking evaluation seriously?
So beyond the generic evals, thing that we already discussed. Now, when people have somewhat resistance to looking at data, and so as you know, being a student in the evals class, the most important thing you can possibly do when you're building an AI application is to look at data, is to
Yeah.
look at traces, and you can sample them and actually go through some of those and start to annotate what is going wrong. Now, most people, when they hear that, they have a feeling inside that this sounds wrong.
Mhm.
How can you tell me that in the age of AI, the thing I should do is open some kind of spreadsheet or open some kind of data viewer and look at individual data points? How can that possibly be effective? It sounds like the wrong approach, but that is the right approach when you're starting out, is to, in the fastest way that you can get intuition on how your product is breaking. And every single time I've done it, and I've done it with more than 50 companies now, people always find that it is extremely useful, and they, to the extent that they get addicted to looking at data because they find it so helpful, they're able to very, very quickly find all kinds of low hanging fruits and where their product is breaking in unexpected ways, and able to find lots of bugs, things like that. And it's just a very highly leveraged activity. And data scientists have known this for a really long time, by the way. If you talk to any data scientist and you ask them, oh, like, how would you debug some kind of predictive model? Any experienced data scientist will tell you, well, you would start looking at data, actual individual predictions, and get a sense of, okay, where things are going wrong. And it's kind of a epiphany for a lot of data scientists. They're like, doesn't sound scalable, but it actually is a very effective technique. And so what we teach in our evals course is, how do you do that? So it's not just I'm sitting behind you and, like, forcing your eyelids open and looking at data. That's not what I mean by looking at data. Looking at data is actually, there's a skill and a process and a way to look at data so that it's very effective, and that it brings you value very quickly. And so that's the number one thing. That's the number one cultural shift. Is kind of this culture of, oh, like looking at data and doing a little bit of data analysis is really helpful. Now, this culture, kind of may have existed before. We've all lived through the data science, big data, whatever culture before. For some reason, that aspect of things hasn't made its way over to AI yet. If you know what I mean, we kind of
Mhm.
mentally said we don't need that anymore. We have AI.
Yeah.
But there's a certain aspect of that that we need, which is the data analysis and data thinking. So if you bring some of those flavor of those skills back into the building of AI applications, and that is where you can see a really big benefit. And so, that's what we teach, and that's like one of the main. That's probably the main sort of culture shift, mind shift that is required uh, when you know doing this process correctly.
Yeah, I think that has been the most powerful uh, thinking shift for me as well. Like because it's really tempting to automate that looking at the data part, and it makes a huge difference if you actually go and look into the data, right, rather than automating things away. So yeah, I totally agree. And I think that is, yeah, when you talk to customers about it, like it kind of, they take it with a pinch of salt, right? So anyway, so I think connected to that, what when I talk to some of these you know uh, uh, banks, because I work in FSI, is when it goes, so there are two things, right? So one is pre-launch testing, right? But then there is this, when you move to production, then you have to do this continuous evaluation. And when we move to these kind of subjects, the questions that I normally get is, well, at what frequency we need to look into the data, right? How much of that we need to look into? What sort of time does my resources need to spend on the continuous evaluation piece? Can't we just automate? Can't we use LLMs judges? These are the common questions that we get. What do you how do you explain this? Have you got certain numbers, or what is the best way of doing evals, continuous evaluation in production?
Yeah. So the whole purpose of looking at okay, how do you keep this process tractable? Like, and the question is, how often do you have to look at data for evals? And is there a way of automating it?
Yeah.
And so these are really interesting questions. Now, again, I want to come back to looking at the data. And what we tell people to do is to look at least 100 traces. 100
Mhm.
is not a magic number, it's just a cognitive unblock that we tell people so that they can start looking at data without anxiety. Because people need some goal. If I just say, hey, just look at data and you trust me, you will figure it out, then you will know when to stop. People won't do it. So give them a goal of 100 traces. And then once they get closer to the 100, we say, then we update them with more knowledge. We say, okay, there's a concept called theoretical saturation, which just means keep reading traces until you feel like you're not learning anything. And usually people get it. People are like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to keep reading. This is really useful. Like I am learning so much right now." And you don't even need to tell me that. I'm not going to stop at 100. I'm going to keep going because I can't stop. Like I'm keep learning every time I read something. Um and then once you kind of tackle that level, then the rest becomes easier and easier. So like now what you can do is um once you've looked at some data, you've annotated it, you have some labels, and you can then sort of start to build these automated evals. You can build LLM as a judge, you can build code based evals, so on and so forth. And then when we talk about, okay, how often do you have to revisit this? How often do you have to look at data? It's really easy then to explain like, hey, you want to do this every so often. Your automated evals will fail in production. It will flag issues. The whole point of evals is they will flag problems in production. And of
Yeah.
course, you want to look at those problems that are flagged. And you want to look at those problems that are flagged. And hey, that magical experience that you had looking at the data to begin with, you want to repeat that exercise, that exploration exercise every so often. And people, they always get it. Like if you're doing the process correctly, they're like, oh, yeah, that was so valuable. I'm going to do it again. And it makes sense that now we have automated evals that I'm going to obviously be looking at those too. And so this is all compounds on top of each other and becomes much easier over time. As you build out your automated evals, what you're doing is you're creating a harness.
Mhm.
And I think the idea of a software engineering harness has been popularized already. You may have seen the OpenAI blog post about harness engineering, where they
Yeah.
have they had an internal tool. It was a code base, more than 1 million lines of code. And they orchestrated it with what they called harness engineering, which is a set of instructions and tests everywhere to put guardrails around this agentic sort of software development. But also, crucially, what they had in that harness engineering paper is a observability suite where every time the app is tested in a sandbox, it would log observability to a platform, and then the agent would observe the traces that were logged. And
Mhm.
so evals are exactly the same. If you wanted to take when you kind of enter this future of AI assisted coding, having these evals as a harness is going to be critical. It's going to allow you to know whether your application is good or not, and you can have AI look at these things, run these evals, look at the traces as well to keep more guardrails around your agentic software engineering processes. And so, I absolutely think that it's just a feedback loop that's just going to sort of snowball. And I think um, having these harnesses, which a large part of harnesses is evals, frankly, that's going to be the thing that's going to really separate the teams who can move fast with AI, like AI
Mm,
development, from the teams that can't.
makes sense. I think when we started this discussion, you mentioned one of the most common misconceptions is like businesses starting with tools that report certain metrics, right? Um, if there had to be metrics for evals, what are the right metrics, and how do you connect them to the business outcomes?
Yeah. So always get asked like, what are my favorite metrics for evals? And my favorite metrics for evals are specific errors that you can observe or simulate in your application. It's not hallucination score, coherence score, anything like that. What it is when you look at your traces, you will observe very specific errors. You'll observe errors with certain tool calls mishandling things. You might have disambiguation issues with queries, with user queries. You might have calendar scheduling issues if your application is trying to schedule applications or schedule um uh schedule appointments. Um you know Depends on the domain. You might have very specific errors, and what you want to do is you want to back off of those generic metrics because that those don't really help you, and you want to put a bunch of tests in place that help you guard against the errors that are most likely to appear in your system. And this is just like software engineering, right? Would you rely on generic metrics for software engineering tests? No. You wouldn't just have like number of lines of code and just a linter only.
Yeah.
That wouldn't make any sense. Like you want like actual test. You're testing specific features of your application. And so similarly, like you want to think about this in a somewhat similar sense. And so you need to have metrics specific to your failures. There are some niches where generic metrics are okay, but you have to pick the right generic metric for your specific situation. So some niches where it makes sense is retrieval. So retrieval
Mm,
is a subset of your system that is a search engine. So in RAG, the R, the thing that's doing the retrieval is search. And so there are ways to measure search that are general, but you have to use the right generic metric. So like you have to think about, okay, do you care about ranking of results? Do you care about how many results can you show? Um, Are most things just one document that's relevant, or because there are multiple documents that are relevant for a given query, given my type of application? Like, what is like the most common type of thing? All kinds of questions come up, and that those guide you to okay, what should be the right? metric for search. So there's still
Uh-huh.
generic metrics, but you need to narrow it down. You need to apply a little bit of domain knowledge to get to that. But beyond that, it's really just your domain specific metrics. Now you can aggregate those. You can aggregate those
Yeah.
domain specific metrics. But what you really want to do is have domain specific metrics. And again, this is whenever I look at a company and ask them to show me their evals and they show me a dashboard, they say, okay, like we're using deep eval or we're using, some kind of other framework. And they only have generic metrics. We already know
Uh,
that they're in trouble. And that's really the reason why they usually call me to begin with. It's like, hey, we're feeling lost. And there's a correlation between the generic metrics and feeling lost because you will get they cannot guide you.
Correct. Correct. When I meet businesses and talk to some of my customers, I always find there's someone in the organization who understands this. As you rightly pointed out, right? Eval has always existed as a practice. It's just that it is novel to people now because people have come to know about it after the AI buzz. So I always find there's one or two people who understand this, and probably they attended your course, so they follow your content, or in general they know about evals. But what they struggle is basically going and then championing evaluation within the organization and bringing in more people. What do you think they should, like, if they had to do something tomorrow to start this journey? What should they do? How should they start?
Yeah. So the best way to champion evals is to lead with results. And what I mean by that is don't go into a meeting and say, "Hey, we need to do evals." It's kind of like that top-down approach that we just discussed, which is you don't want to shove it down people's throats. No one is going to listen to that. What you want to do is show up to every meeting with some data and findings and metrics. So you want to be doing the evals yourself. You want to be doing error analysis. And you want to be showing up to every meeting with, hey, these are the errors that I've found. These are some errors that we fixed. And these are some automated ways that we're going to find that going forward.
Mhm.
And keep doing that. Pretty soon, what ends up happening is that people start to ask you, how do you know so much about the product? And how do you consistently find out what's happening? And this always happens. And then that's when then you are championing it. Then now you have a reason to then tell people, okay, there's this set of techniques. Let me teach you about what I'm doing. And you still don't even have to say the word evals. I mean, it's really not
Yeah,
about evals. I give it a name because it needs a name. But
yeah.
inherently, what we're talking about is how do you do good AI engineering?
Mhm. Makes sense. I think one of the tempting thing that I see they do is put evals 101 on a slide deck and start presenting it to different teams, which obviously don't work. And that's where, like, I think advice that you put here is start doing it yourself, and show the results that will bring other people in. Need to be a bit patient, but I think that works better than going and training people.
Yeah, what works? So if you want to put a slide deck out there, what you want to do is build the story. So your slide deck shouldn't say evals 101. It should say my XYZ product reduced their error rate from 30 to 5% in 6 weeks. Let me show you
Mhm.
how, right? So you want to frame these presentations and these internal discussions as results oriented.
Uh-huh.
And then you can have in that presentation something about evals like, hey, this is the whole systematic process. And by the way, this is the process I use for everything that I'm doing. Um, but if you zoom out a little bit, that's probably the way you should introduce anything in business, to
Uh-huh.
be honest.
Yeah.
Like you should never say, okay, like do this test driven development, do this kind of way of working, do XYZ. No. One always want to lead with the results. Because ultimately that's the
Yeah.
most convincing.
True. Absolutely. Uh, looking ahead, right? If you think about 5 years ahead from now, do you see, how do you see a mature enterprise evaluation practice look like?
Yeah. So okay, I think some things will change with evals going forward. So okay, what is the future of evals? How will it change? The biggest shift
Yeah.
that we see nowadays is how good AI is at building products and dealing with technical toil. So before, what you had to do with evals is you had to do a lot of cumbersome things. You had to instrument your code, collect the traces. Instrumenting the code itself was a pain. Um, and then you had to like collect the traces. Then you had, you're pushing your traces into some database. You would have to get those back out of the database, analyze
Mhm.
that information. Maybe you needed to build a annotation app of some kind or customize one to do the sort of data analysis or annotation. You had to build it. If you wanted to build an LLM judge, you had to sort of do all the plumbing. You have to do some amount of plumbing at some point. You have to stick the prompt into somewhere somehow, and you had to test it or do whatever. So there's a lot of toil involved in all of this stuff. And the good news is all of that is going away. Okay. All of this stuff that we just talked about, you
Uh,
can pretty soon you can go to Claude, Cursor, you name it, and tell it you want to do this, XYZ, ABC. You want to instrument your code, boom, your code is instrumented. You want to get your traces out of your observability platform, great. All major eval platforms have an MCP now.
yeah.
All infrastructures has APIs and MCPs, and there's a strong push in that direction. So all of this is going to melt away. All of the toil and sort of glue code and all that is all going to melt. What we're going to be left with is the process. Like, okay, you driving what you want to see, your idea of what does good look like, and then how do you scale your taste, like your inherent taste of what is good. How do you scale that across the whole product? And fundamentally, that's what evals is. And so you don't have to know how to code. You don't have to know about this database or this vendor or anything. You don't have to know anything like that. All you have to know is like, okay, this is what I want to do in a structured way of thinking. And so we'll have that, and there'll also be skills for eval. So like, so today I'm publishing a blog post. And it's already on my blog. I just haven't announced it, so you can point your viewers at it. Is a set of skills for evals, and they're meant to
Mhm.
complement the various eval vendor MCPs. And so it basically helps you get started to do kind of like a diagnostic on your evals. Like, are you making any big mistakes? So, we've taken the thousands of hours that we've spent with students, teaching them evals, but also working with all the companies, and we've seen like the same mistake over and over again. So we've distilled a lot of that into these skills that then you can also connect with your coding agent to do an audit and do all kinds of
Yeah.
other things. And so this is just an example. I think it's going to be a lot easier, but fundamentally, you still have to know what you want. And you should still have like a general idea of like how exactly, how things work. So, like, you know, it's still the case with coding, for example, if you're trying to build like a real software application, not a prototype, to know a little bit about software engineering. Like, what is a
Yeah.
server? What is backend? What is front end? How does authentication work? What are some things you might want to worry about? How does a database, like, the fundamental, just very basic stuff of like databases, not anything crazy, just like, some background knowledge so that you can reason through things if you're trying to build something, right? Like that's table stakes. There's no way, like, you need to be able to work, navigate your way around or even talk to the AI. It'd be like inefficient to talk to AI to tell it what you want if you didn't know some of these terms, or like have an idea what's going on. Similar with
Mm.
eval. You want to have a little bit of proficiency of like, this is what I want and how can I explain it in a way that is somewhat precise. And the skills will get you a little bit way there to get started. But if you want to be really good at it, it's always good to learn from somewhere, which is I highly recommend. Either, there's a lot of free materials out there, course. Obviously, I teach a course on it. I write a lot of blog posts on it. Whatever's easiest for you, I highly recommend you take a look.
Do you think in the future we will still need to look into data?
Yeah, I think we'll always need to look at data, and it's not that we are finding issues in data that
Hmm.
it's not the case that we are just looking at data to find problems in data. Looking at the data is eliciting the requirements that we have of what is good. It is helping to get that out of us and give it to the AI. So ultimately, there's this phenomenon called criteria drift. You can write a specification up front as much as you want about what you think a good product it looks like or whatnot. But it's only until you see real user interactions with your product that you understand what it is you want, and you can like articulate like what is good, what do you want to happen, and
Mhm.
that process of eliciting requirements from yourself and transferring your tastes to the AI so that the AI can scale your taste and your preferences, that a key sort of vehicle for doing that is to look at data and to write down what you are seeing when you look at data. So it's kind of this it's a very human process,
Mhm.
but it's a human process that's designed to make you scale. So it's not meant to be tedious. And so I
Yeah,
think, you know, if we are in a regime where we want to use AI to make humans taste scale, then yes, you need to look at data. The only reason we wouldn't need to look at data is if we created some kind of AGI that we felt is just as good as a human, that has sufficient taste or better taste than humans,
do you think
and
that will
can
happen?
do. Yeah, which we don't have yet, but if we
Yeah,
did get there, like a general purpose thing that you trusted across many different dimensions of your life, generally, then maybe we don't have to look at data. Maybe the AI could look at the data then.
makes sense. Makes sense. Let's move to the fun part of the podcast. So I do a rapid fire round, just five
Yeah,
questions.
yeah,
Just answer whatever comes to your mind first. Right? Are you ready?
yeah.
Okay. Uh, Evaluation is most often confused with.
Evaluation is most often confused with foundation model evals. At least when the term that I'm when I say evals, people don't know what we're talking about. Foundation model
Yeah,
evals or product specific evals, and I think the thing you probably want to pay attention to most is the product evals.
makes sense. One role every enterprise is underutilizing in evaluation.
The domain experts are definitely underutilized.
I agree with that. I can second that. The biggest mistakes teams make when defining evaluation metrics.
Using generic metrics,
If you could force every enterprise to adopt one evaluation habit tomorrow, what would it be?
looking at the data, doing error analysis.
I knew that's coming. In 5 words, evaluation in enterprise AI is continue or finish it.
Is data science for AI.
Great stuff. Great. Um, is there any other thought or message you wanted to leave for our audience that we did not cover?
Yeah, the biggest thought I want to leave is learn how to look at data. I promise that it is the highest value activity you can possibly engage in if you're building an AI product, counterintuitively so. So give it a chance. If you want to learn more how to look at the data, you can find more information about me, in which I write a lot about it. But please do try to learn that.
Yeah, I'm beyond your course. I really love your content, especially reading your blogs. Like, I can read the blogs and imagine that you're speaking because they're so good and in your voice. So, thank you for contributing and writing all the content for the community. It's really helpful for us as well. I genuinely appreciate the clarity that you bring in this practice, and thank you very much for doing this podcast with me. I really appreciate your time as well.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for watching my content. It's really appreciated. I need a favor from you. If you can subscribe to my channel, that helps the YouTube algorithm to drive more views. If you find my content valuable, please subscribe to my channel and share it with your friends as well. This will help me bring in more valuable guests to the podcast so that you can learn from their knowledge in the field. Thank you very much.